In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
Need a holiday gift that will keep her sparkling all year long? Right now, Blue Nile, the original online jeweler, is offering 30% off select jewelry. With experts on hand 24/7 to provide guidance, you're sure to find the perfect piece. And now there's even more to love about shopping at BlueNile.com. For a limited time, get 36-month special financing on minimum purchases of $1,000. Restrictions apply. See BlueNile.com for details. That's BlueNile.com.
Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
Hey gang, and welcome to our latest Serie A Chronicles Q&A mailbag. It is me, Nicky Mina, and as always, I have with me Mina Rizuki. Hey Mina, how are you?
Guys, have you noticed that I have like a little power over Nicky? When I say as always, she says as always, but when I say as ever, she'll say as ever.
Oh my goodness, I hadn't noticed that. Is that like Darren Brown level of mind games going on? Yes. Do you know, it's a long time. I feel like Darren Brown isn't a thing anymore, but Darren Brown, our producer Simon probably has no idea who Darren Brown is. Darren Brown is like one of those sort of mind control. He always says he's not a psychic, but like mind control people who had a moment when he was very sort of on TV constantly in England and doing stage shows and stuff, and some very impressive stage shows. But I actually got a call out of the crowd to go on stage.
Oh, did you?
And it didn't work on me. Like he got a bunch of us up at the same time, and like, and we had to. This is so far off track of this podcast. I don't even know how we've got here, but here we are. We like had to start off like one of the things you do, like got people out randomly out of the crowd, but just like throwing paper balls around, and then once you're up on stage, you had to hold like a metal nut on a string, and then we were told like to move it with our mind, but not move our arms. And I was not able to move it with my mind. I would argue because other people would be just moving their arms and not realizing they were moving their arms because they were susceptible to his suggestion. And therefore he kept those people on stage because those are the ones that he then could do the other things with. That's just speculation. I'm not Darren Brown. And
I bet if it was me getting you to move it with your mind, you would. I'm joking.
Maybe I've just got a rubbish mind that won't move a metal nut on a string. I don't know. It could be
never
a
say
failing
that about
of mine.
yourself. You have a wonderful mind.
Listen. Like Matilda was like very possibly my favorite kids book growing up. So like I wish I could do that stuff. I spent plenty of time looking at a pencil and trying to make it move, but I'm not Matilda. So
I love that you did that.
Oh, 100%. I wanted to be telepathic. That would be amazing. Right. Let's do a question since this is the Q&A podcast, Mina. We're clearly in a silly mood today, everyone. Sorry. Hey, Nicky and Mina, we've got an email. Actually, we've got an email from Mina. You're going to be excited. We've got an email from Jill, your favourite, one named
Madonna.
Up with Jared. Patreon Tifoso.
Oh, yay, I'm so excited.
Jill says, she was so excited when we released our podcast. Thank you, Jill. That's so lovely to hear. Loves hearing us discuss Serie A. And thank you, Mina, for making me laugh by making fun of my first name only signature like Madonna. Oh my gosh. She's literally inside your head and vice versa. A question for when travel becomes more normal. What is your favorite Serie A stadium to visit from a neutral perspective?
Well, it depends on what you're looking for. If it's atmosphere, then there's nothing that beats San Siro, right? In the sense of like, just to, if you watch like a big match, I mean, all you needed to see really was how Milan fans were waiting for the Milan players in the game yesterday against Juventus, and the greeting that everyone gets, and the fire, and it's just like a stadium that just vibrates when there's a lot of like action. And I mean, it was better when they had Fossa de Leone. Their ultras made it even more atmospheric, but it's just a wonderful stadium to go to. I've actually seen a lot more Milan games there than I've seen Inter, which is very interesting, but it's definitely my favorite stadium in Italy. Juve Stadium's nice, in terms of the big teams, but it doesn't come to San Siro. Now, here's an interesting one. I actually really like the Bentegodi. It's like the worst stadium in the world. And I think it was voted as one of the worst in Italy as well. I mean, I don't even remember there being bathrooms. I actually fainted the first time I went there as well. Oh no, that's not true.
Oh,
I fainted as well when I went there with the ESPNs. I have a history of fainting because it gets really hot in August and there's no ventilation and the press room has no AC. So it's horrendous in that level. But because I'm so in love with Verona, maybe that's what it is. I just love the opportunity to be able to go there. And I like where the journalists sit. And I don't know, I guess I've always it was the first time I'd watched Ronaldo play. So maybe I have like a special memory of the Bentegodi. What about you? Oh, Artemio Fianchi. I think it was really nice. Yeah.
I think there's sort of so many like thoughts that come into my head with a question like this. I mean, the honest answer is the most boring answer, which is San Siro, because San Siro is the stadium that I always say this, like when I stand underneath San Siro, like the hair stands up on my neck. Like, I think it's such an imposing, like heavy concrete venue that's also, despite being heavy concrete, quite beautiful, especially when it's lit up at night, that it makes me dizzy. Like, I love it. And
tingle.
The inside as well, like it's got these sort of steep stands looking down at the pitch that again, like they can almost make you feel a bit of vertigo up there, but it's such a dramatic setting for a big football game, and the atmosphere inside it on the big nights is really like few others I've known in the world. But I have things that I'm fond about in lots of different stadiums. I think if you want like a pure tourist experience, we've talked about it already this season on other podcasts, Venezia, and that rickety little stadium in the middle of the lagoon where you can have that view out across and you can see the Dolomites in the background. It's barely a stadium. It's some metal bleachers and some concrete bleachers, but the experience of traveling there on a vaporetto and seeing out like that is astonishing. I'm personally extremely fond of the Dallara at Bologna Stadium because my family is from not from Bologna, but they're from Emilia-Romagna, and so it's a stadium that I sort of got to see up close. It is very sort of one of the coziest stadiums, I think, and of course, in terms of, again, you're asking about when travel becomes more normal, I tell everyone to go to Bologna because Bologna, in my opinion, and I know Gab Marcotti would disagree with me, it's the best place to eat in all of Italy. I think you get the best pasta in all of Italy. And so go to Bologna, stuff yourself silly with fresh pasta and have a nice day trip to the Dallara. But the other, one that I don't even think this is probably on my list particularly, but I just, when this question came into my head and I was thinking about different experiences at different Italian football stadiums I've had, and I was thinking about, again, what is essentially a terrible football stadium in terms of like not being modern, not being particularly comfortable, but the Stadio Olimpico in Turin, now the Grande Torino, which is not much of a stadium, but I just have in my image, in my head, the image the last time I was there, this image of the curva, which is like a few of the Italian curve I find, astonishingly loud for being a not very well designed stadium that's far from the pitch, that doesn't have great acoustics. Astonishingly loud curva. And I just have this really powerful visual of the last time I was there, because under the curva, where the running track is, like before the game, you had kids like having a kickabout and like with their dads and their mums and like that sort of, again, fairly chaotic. Probably can't happen now with COVID, actually, the sort of thing that I doubt is still happening. But that experience of being there and seeing that and thinking, oh, isn't that what football's about though? Like, you know, when you're a kid, yeah, someone's taking you to the game, but actually just having a kickabout and then you watch your heroes do it. I remember thinking that was a really sort of a moment that stayed with me. So lots of stadiums. For me, because it's an excuse to go to Bologna, I say go to the Lara. But look, there's things to love about different stadiums all over Italy. And if you just want the one that's going to leave the impression on you that lasts a lifetime, it probably still is San Siro, even though that's maybe the boring answer.
Can I say something? When my mom and dad were younger, my mom said that every time she lost my dad, he'd be somewhere in Bologna trying to eat. So that is definitely something.
Smart man, God. I mean, she should have been there with him.
Yeah. But they really love pizza as well. So they love the food in Pisa. They're really obsessed with pizza in general.
Pisa's lovely. And that's a trip you can do the two things together.
Exactly.
Like they're really close.
So we used to, I mean, I've done that trip so many times with my parents when I was younger. It's definitely one of their favorite places to go. So yeah, I'm going to agree with you on all of those. Okay, next question, and this is from Michael Betts. Ooh, Chronicles Tifoso Patreon member. Welcome, and thank you. Hello, I am happy to support your Patreon. Great discussion of the Dybala situation this week. I was wondering, in your opinion, at what point should a club stop paying its players for their talent and start looking at their on-field production? I can see paying a 20 to 23-year-old because you believe in his talent will grow into a world-class player. But at 28, I would be paying a forward for the number of goal contributions rather than for the occasional amazing play. Goals don't tell the whole story, but Dybala's last season, where he was significantly more productive than Insigne, was 2017 to 2018. What do you think, Nikki?
I think this is a really interesting way of framing this question. He's essentially asking, Mike is essentially asking us, where do you stop paying for promise? And I think it's just one of those answers, unfortunately, that's not easy to give in a sort of blanket way. I think it's slightly a how long is a piece of string question, because I sort of feel like I might share what Michael is driving at here, which is the feeling that maybe Dybala, who hasn't, I would say, overall lived up to the level of expectation we had for him, becomes a harder and harder prospect to justify spending the money on every year and giving a long contract to, especially because I don't expect to see some transformation in terms of what he's able to provide at this point in his career. I think that when we strip something down to just numbers, which is what's sort of being suggested in the last sort of part of that question, goal contributions, we get into really sort of complicated territory for clubs, because the statistics that we talk about journalistically, goals and assists, they're very noisy statistics. Of course, great players like your Ronaldos are so good that they just put up a huge number of goals every year. But actually the number of goals a player scored, the number of assists they get, for a lot of players can swing quite a lot on small details, and clubs themselves are often more interested in other details, such as expected goals, certainly being, again, a pretty obvious one, distance covered, the positions they're putting themselves in. There's so much more sort of nuance behind the obvious numbers that is hard to sort of capture just in a number. And I think that when you talk about forwards, perhaps you can get trapped in those, especially those headline numbers, because goals and assists, we all talk about them. And there's a reason that the goal scorers get paid the most, because they do, because it's the hardest thing to do in football is to put the ball in the net. But to use an example that's in my mind, just because it's the one in my mind, we've talked about before on this podcast, just because Ciro Immobile doesn't score as many goals for the national team, does that mean he's useless to the national team? And I would say it doesn't mean that, right? Like he has a role he can give because of his work ethic, because of the runs he makes, even when he isn't scoring as much. Now, maybe you say that has a lower value than what he does for Lazio, where he's scoring almost a goal, 2 goals every 3 games. So the numbers get complicated. That's a very long-winded way of saying the numbers get complicated. I think the other point that's in my head, and I think I talked about this last week on the main episode of the podcast, is this sort of other really complicating factor for clubs of sunk cost versus the cost of signing in someone new. When you have someone who's already at your club, the cost to extend their contract, give them a new contract, is relative to bringing in someone from outside the club almost always lower. Because with someone from outside the club, you've got to pay a transfer fee and you still have to pay their wages on top. Even if you found someone on a free transfer who you like, you're probably going to pay a big chunky signing on bonus to their agent or somewhere else. So you have additional costs over the cost of keeping someone who you already have. So all of these complications get really, all of these considerations get really complicated and layered, is what I'm kind of trying to say. And I don't know if I can give you a simple answer of at what point clubs should do it. At the same time, I think I agree with where you're coming from, because it seems like what you're getting at, Michael, is that you think that Juventus maybe should not be still paying Dybala the amount they are for the production he's getting. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but you sort of brought that in by mentioning the conversation we had. And I might agree with you in that individual case. I just think that every case in the end is complicated and gets considered on lots of merits that maybe are not all the ones even that we end up talking about as journalists. And perhaps that's a fault on our part as well.
I think this is why we have sporting directors, and really now it shouldn't just be one man, but it should be like probably a 3-man job, sort of a united squad that discuss things and all have something or a special superpower, somebody who's really good at scouting, somebody who understands what a player needs to give all over, how much, financially, how much it costs the club. So if you have those types of directors at club level, then this all becomes easier. Because I agree in terms of stats. I mean, actually Karim Benzema, who is my favorite forward and has been for very many, many, many years now. I've spoken about him at length in every opportunity I get. But for me, he's far and away the best striker. I think he's better than anyone in the world. And not because he scores a lot of goals, because he will be outdone by the likes of, and has been, by Luis Suarez, obviously Robert Lewandowski. Lewandowski is great. But what Benzema does is he's happy to be a facilitator, to be the man that delivers, to play in the final third and actually allow Gareth Bale and Ronaldo to be the excellent finishers that they were at Real Madrid. He is happy to be a false number 9. He is happy to be anything that you want him to be. He just wants to make the team better. But sometimes statistically, if you look at assists or goals, it's not as much as, say, you would expect from another number 9, especially if you're comparing him to something like Lewandowski. But there is so much to consider here, right? And he spoke about it. He said, I've always been good, but you guys just notice me now because there's no Ronaldo, so now I have to finish. And so obviously my goal rates are better because I get to finish. I'm playing. But what he's done for Vinicius Jr., yes, I mean, what he's done to elevate the level and the game that the rest of the team do, what he does to elevate the game in the final third, that's what makes the difference. And I think for me, that is what I look for in my players, is what they can do to make the team better. One of the reasons why I was such a fan of Carlos Tevez, I wasn't when he was under Antonio Conte. I thought he was pretty selfish, and it was really annoying me in the Champions League when he was trying to score a goal because he needed to satisfy his own statistics because he hadn't scored in the Champions League for a while. But what I loved so much about him is that Allegri made him a more selfless player. And when he brought in Morata and passed to him so that Morata can score, you've just bumped up the confidence level of a young kid. You have shown yourself to be a selfless player who wants the team to win rather than yourself. You have brought unity. I mean, it's simple things. It's like Pirlo doing a panenka on Joe Hart changed the overall attitude of the Italian national team in that penalty shootout against England in Euro 2012. I want that kind of player, And stats, I mean, I think Opta changed the way, or they were looking at ways in which they can change stats, because at the end of the day, when Germany won the Champions League, when they won the World Cup in 2014, many people from the eye test could see that it was all because of Khedira and Cruz, the way that they masterminded that midfield and understood their duties and helped elevate the game and secure them from a defensive point of view while contributing so much in attack. And yet on a statistical level, you don't know how to show that. How can you reflect that? How can you reflect their importance on the match? And that's why, I guess, in other ways, we've been looking at ways that we can see how stats or what we can see from midfielders is making the difference. With Dybala, my issue with him, I think when you analyze the player, you have to look at a bunch of things. One of them is what he can do to keep driving the team forward. I just remember a hideous game under Pirlo, and I feel like it was against Fiorentina, but it was against Fiorentina last season. But Chiesa was just a one-man team. I mean, he was so desperate to win that match. It was like, come hell or high water, we're going to get a point, you know? And it's that kind of thing. It's like never say die attitude is so important. It is the Pirlo scoring that type of Panenka to raise the overall confidence of the team. That is on a mental level, the feeling, the desire to go far. That for me is worth 10 million. You know, I'm happy to pay that leadership quality. I also like people who feel attached to the shirt, but genuinely feel attached to the shirt in the way that Dries Mertens is. And not every year we're discussing your relationship with the new coach. You know, get over it. This is why I'm very critical of players like Insigne. Oh, so what's your relation? And every year he does an interview in which, just like a few weeks ago when he discussed, well, Sarri was this and Ancelotti was that. And no, you are a club icon. You don't discuss that. You discuss what you can give to the team. And for me, like Tonali taking a pay cut, I would want to give him something as a bonus after that, because these performances, his devotion to the club shirt, that matters overall. And another thing that matters is progression. I don't need you to be the final product. Dybala doesn't have to be Ronaldo to earn 10 million. He just needs to show me that every year he's doing something more than he did the year before. Vlahovic every year shows us, and he's just a kid, but off the ball, on the ball, his finishing, his quality of play and what he elevates in the final third, shoot from left foot, try something with the right foot, whatever it is. It's Zidane went a whole season just trying to shoot from his weaker foot to prove to himself that he can do it. Progression. I don't need you to win the Champions League, but I need every year my coach to show me that my team is getting better. And I think that's what we need to pay for. And I think that's the point of having a sporting director. It is the eye test. It is trying to see what you're giving me and to make sure that whatever happens, you always act professionally. And by that, you don't throw your players under a bus if you're a coach. But if you're a player, you don't just get angry if you don't get your own way. You don't walk off. You don't leave and in a huff to the dressing room if you have been taken off as a sub. These things matter. And the only way you can get away with bad behavior is if you're giving me Ronaldo's goals. Otherwise, go away.
Excellently put. Excellently put. Mina, I've got one more question for us.
Okay.
From Sanat Talmaki, who tweeted us on Twitter, I think. After watching Inter versus Venezia and how quickly the fans in the stadium went from cheering to whistling and booing, I wanted to get your take on fans in Italy versus other leagues. Are fans in Italy more fickle and turn on their team more quickly? Sanat used the hashtag Chronicles Q&A, which is how you get your Q&A questions picked up by us on Twitter. So please do include that hashtag. Mina, what do you think?
Thanks, Sanat. Okay. I do think Italian fans are notoriously, let's just say, more demanding. I think a lot of the times when coaches talk about the Premier League, or the beauty of the Premier League is that fans really stick behind their teams. They really try to egg them on. They really encourage them. Whereas in Italy, everyone has got such a low tolerance for any form of anything they see that they don't like. It immediately results in lots of booing, lots of, oh, this is terrible, And also I think that's reflected in the media. The media in England, for example, where we live, it's very important, where I've realized now when I'm doing American or I'm doing English or I'm doing anything European, how I'm allowed to speak. I'm so used to giving my opinion, being like, oh, I think it's rubbish, you know? That's not really tolerated in English TV, and I've got a bad lesson at that, you know? Because when I'd go on radio, I'd be like, I don't think it's that good. And over here, people are a lot more forgiving, a lot more encouraging of their players, a lot more of course, that doesn't mean that they're always, you know, crazy about their players and about their coach. We've seen Arsenal get angry at Arsene Wenger eventually, and Ole got sacked. But there is a somewhat nice way of going about it that you don't have in Italy. I remember Riccardo Quaresma said that on a mental health level, like, Inter was really hard, because it was like, you're new to the country, and any little mistake he made would result in a get out of my club, you don't know how to play football, and just lots of abuse. And then there's shows that give you like Capire d'Oro, you know, like just your like basically like, you know, awards for being the worst on the pitch or the worst transfer or the worst whatever it is, like Aaron Ramsey, you know. And so they are horrible. Incidentally, Gianluca Vialli argues that because it is such a demanding culture in which even kids are not allowed to make mistakes at any level, this is why Italy wins World Cups, is because when they do reach the big matches, when it is the world stage, when they are united, they don't feel the pressure like anyone else does. For them, it's just another day. They know tomatoes will come. They know they will be hated. But you know what? It's life, and they got used to it at a young age, and it created stronger characters. And they won the World Cup, what, 4 times? 3 times? Four
It's
times,
definitely 4, Mina.
4 times, and twice in Europe.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think, you know, I don't know, maybe it's worked for them, but I kind of like the intolerant fan base sometimes.
I think it's a bit more nuanced than that. I suppose, again, having been a fan of Arsenal, I've seen some pretty entitled fandom at times at Emirates Stadium, which is a stadium that is not necessarily one that is always the loudest in general, but like certainly there's been some times, I would say, that the tail end of the Arsene Wenger era and into the post period. Maybe it's getting a bit better now, but I think there's been some times when the fan base has been very quick to turn during games and to sort of a mood to get quite down on players very quickly, and, you know, without wanting to turn this into the Premier League Chronicles podcast. You know, I think there's you know, situations like Emmanuel Abue being reduced to tears. I think there's certainly, and Arsenal aren't unique in that. I think there's certainly fan bases in England that can be quite savage with their own players at times. And conversely, I think that the ultras culture in Italy has 2 sides. It's a double-edged sword. I agree with you that there is an element that's very, very hard. And I think it's interesting that the example you cited was Quaresma, because, of course, I think that sort of harshness, that sort of unforgivingness is probably applied more harshly, more stridently to people who are, I guess, for want of another way of putting it, I guess, outsiders to begin with. I think I'm trying to sort of draw a contrast between someone who is a player who is signed by a club from a foreign country to, for instance, at the extreme end, a Francesco Totti in Rome, who I think at times was forgiven anything. You know what I mean? Maybe not by everyone, but I think that there are elements in the Italian fan base that can be like that can be like certain people who are considered one of us are given a lot of rope, a lot of leeway, and people who are not within the culture, and it doesn't have to be someone from a foreign country. I suppose even some of the various managers who came in and tried to manage Totti found very quickly, because Totti was the fan favourite and they weren't, that the speed with which the ultras would turn on them to defend Totti would happen in a heartbeat. Yeah. So I think
but can I just
it's just complicated with the ultra culture. Sorry, yeah.
Is it because Totti is Totti, like a, you know, sort of like an icon of football, like, you know, Baggio, that kind of thing?
Totti's an extreme example for sure.
And so do you think that it would still be this way, like, let's say if, I mean, Romagnoli, right, is captain of Milan, and yet when he does badly, he's heavily booed, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. Like it's too simple to say it's just like, oh, if you're, I'm sort of drawing one part of it out with the sort of, are you from the in or out group? But I think there's a sort of bigger part of it, which is, I just think it really depends on, in a bigger way, that in a sort of more direct way, there's these relationships that unfold between even specific ultra groups, because ultras are not united, and clubs at times. And I think you see these situations where ultras will almost make demands, frankly, of clubs. Like, you see these sort of semi-regular meetings outside, or at least you did pre-COVID times, outside training camps. We want this sort of attitude, we want that. And sometimes you get these sort of negotiated truces almost, where you get ultras telling coaches or players, we want to see this, more of this from you. And in return, we will guarantee you our support. And I've seen games, Mina, sort of to draw a contrast with what's being sort of suggested here by Sanat. I've seen games where you see the home team concede in Italy and the ultras don't miss a beat. They literally will be singing whatever song they're singing, the drums are going, the chants are going, the goal goes in, and it's like nothing changes inside the stadium because they just keep going. They just press over it. And that's because they're making a show of something. They're making a show of, no, we've said we're going to do this and we're going to do it. So I think it's more complicated because it's dominated in the end by the ultras. What we're talking about when we're talking about this more fickle culture or not, it's hard to answer because there's not one fan culture in Italy. There's your average tifoso who goes to the stadium and watches the game. But there's the ultras who are much louder and who tend to be what we notice inside a stadium and what we draw from. And I just think those dynamics, I'm not disagreeing with a sort of broader point. They probably are more fickle in general, but there's more that goes on there than there is, I would say, certainly with Premier League clubs.
Yeah, but I guess in the overriding, like going back to the question, like Inter versus Venezia, I mean, Inter have been so astonishingly good now for over a year. So it's a little bit, I mean, would you, I don't know, like as in the cheering and the booing and the, God, come on, like get this done. Do you feel like if Manchester City didn't have the game of their lives, that there'd be anything like that?
See, Manchester City, I feel like are a particular example as well, because they have a reputation in England of not having the most sort of big and enthusiastic fan base, don't they? So that's a whole kettle of fish I don't know if I want to get involved in, to be honest.
Okay, I mean, I'm just saying, okay, like, Liverpool, well, you see, this is what I mean. I feel like people stand by their teams a lot more. I mean, even when Ole, like, I mean, with all due respect, like, Pirlo comes into Juventus, like, we know he's not very experienced. And it was like hashtag Pirlo out within like the third week, And I was like, oh my God, everyone, you're defending him because it's Pirlo, and I was defending him, And there were just lots and lots of horrible comments aimed at him to the extent that his son had to come onto social media to explain things. But Ole at the wheel, I mean, the performances were hideous considering the squad they have, I feel like they were all saying get out, and they were all saying we don't want, Solskjaer in charge of our club. But there was still an element of politeness about it. And everyone was still like, doing the heartbreak, like goodbye departure, thank you so much for having coached our team, and you brought us all back together. And there's a lot more love, is what I think sometimes than you get in Italy.
I think that's a valid point. I'm not disagreeing with you. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of give us some sort of
you're right about the nuance,
I guess. But I don't disagree with you sort of broadly, and I think that's a really nice example actually between Solskjaer and Pirlo, because they both have this sort of iconic player status and that element. I suppose Solskjaer is a bit more embedded at Manchester United than Pirlo is, because Pirlo had a great end to his career at Juventus, but he wasn't there forever.
I agree with that. Yeah, you really do look at Solskjaer's Manchester United, whereas Pirlo's like Inter, Milan, Juve. Yeah, I get that. But we hope you enjoyed the Serie A Chronicles Q&A. My hunger levels have now reached, like ridiculous levels. So I'm about to...
Let the woman eat. Let her eat.
And
you're all all of you listening, you're all complicit in stopping Mina from eating today. It's not true. It's not your fault. It's our fault. I'm really messing with you.
I mean, I've reached levels where I'm no longer hungry. I'm hangry. So in order to avoid a fight between me and Nicky, or me and our producer Simon, or anyone really who lives in this household, when I finally get to break out, yes, I'm starting to become mean. So check out our new website at SerieAchronicles.com to find all our episodes, reviews, and to contact us. And you can find the link to become a Chronicles Tifoso on Patreon to get access to exclusive podcast episodes and bonus content, which we are busily planning. Get your questions in on Twitter at SerieAChronPod with the hashtag ChroniclesQ&A, just like Sanat did, or email us or send a voice message via our website. We're going to give priority to our Chronicles Tifosi members for Q&A questions. Like Jill, find both of us on Twitter at Nikki Bandini, at Mina Rizuki, and subscribe to the Serie A Chronicles YouTube channel for clips of the show. Leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm off to eat the biggest pizza I can find. Ciao for now, and thank you to you all, and of course to Nikki Bandini. Ciao. I really am going to go and find the biggest pizza.
Mina eating pizza. Pizza's carbs. Mina doesn't eat carbs. Mina eats steaks.
Yeah, I really am. I'm going to find a steak. That's a much better thing. Where's Deliveroo?
Sorry for getting distracted at the end there. I got a text message about an interview.
Run a joy.
I'm going to be speaking to, in fact, Pioli on Thursday.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yay.
Exciting, huh?
Very exciting. Well done, love.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, oh, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.